All right, thanks again everyone for joining us today for our eFocus series webinar for Razor's Edge as we discuss why are there duplicates in my queries. Our eFocus series webinars are designed to cover relevant topics once a month throughout the year to help you maximize your software investment in Blackbaud's Razor's Edge. I'd like to introduce you again to Allison Watts. She's our fundraising practice manager at Capital Business Solutions and has over 20 years of practical experience as both a fundraising professional and donor management services consultant in a variety of settings. 9 of those years were spent in a director of development capacity. In 2006, Allison transitioned into a consulting role and has since worked closely with a wide range of nonprofits. Now, as a reminder, too, you can use the chat feature to send over any questions as we're going through the webinar, and Allison will get a chance to respond as appropriate either through the content or we'll just handle all those questions after the end. We are recording the webinar and we'll make it available to you early next week. So without further ado, you can take it away, Allison.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome everybody. Let's dive right into something that I think is probably a pretty keen area of interest for all of you. Why are there duplicates in my queries? So first of all, let's talk about the purpose and function of a query. It is a grouping tool and not so much a reporting tool. In other words, it determines who you are going to be outputting information on. It doesn't necessarily determine what that information is. So it is more of a literal translation of what you ask it, and doesn't make any leaps of faith or intuition for you. But you might have had the experience of feeling as if you had gotten the criteria perfect for your query, and then when you look at the results screen, you see that there are many more records than you thought. So here's a query with the potential for displaying duplicates in the results window. As you can see, the criteria is simple. It's that the gift amount on the constituent record is greater than or equal to $500. And then the output for this same query, the details that we want to see about the group, is constituent ID number and name. So the setting of the group is done by the Criteria tab, and this group is anyone having a gift with an amount of $500 or more. And this is what the output of that query looks like. The results window lists, for example, Allison Eve Andrews a number of times. Sometimes users look at this and fear that they have multiple records for Allison Andrews. That's not the case, and I know that because I have output the ID number to show that she has this set of records has the same ID number going down the rows. So this is the same record being output multiple times, multiple rows for the same record. So you don't need to worry that you have to dedupe constituent records. The reason that that is displaying multiple times is because my criteria for this query was about gifts. So the gift, Allison Eve Andrews has apparently given more times than one. So she's on the list multiple times. And you can see down at the bottom right that the total number of rows for this query is 495, but that's not accurate. That's not telling me how many people gave more than $500 because they're listed multiple times. The easiest or quickest way to attempt to deal with these duplicates is by suppressing them. So if in the query window you go to the toolbar and choose Tools, and query options from that drop down, then you can suppress the duplicates by going to the second tab and choosing Suppress Duplicate Rows. So for my simple query with the output of name, Now I have 146 records, and you can see as you look down the left-hand side that everyone is listed only once. Here's Allison Eve Andrews, constituent ID 4. She is only on this list one time. So that worked because this was a simple query. And my output was simple, was name and ID number. Now this suppress duplicates, as I'm sure you have also experienced personally, doesn't always work. And the reason for that is the difference between one-to-one records and one-to-many records. The output for this query that did work with suppressing duplicates was name and ID. Any one record can only have one name. Any one record can only have one ID. So those two fields are one-to-one fields. Hopefully, any one husband only has one wife. So that is a one-to-one relationship. Other fields that are in Razor's Edge that are one-to-one are listed here. Total gift amount, most recent gift date, primary constituency. These are all qualities that any one constituent record can only have one of, as opposed to a one-to-many relationship or a one-to-many field, which can have many values for any one constituent record. So any one constituent record can be related to an unlimited number of other records. So relationship name is one-to-many. Gift amount, as we saw just now, is one-to-many, as opposed to total gift, which is one-to-one. Constituent code can be, depending on your database, one-to-many. Any one record could have multiple constituent codes, but primary constituency is one-to-one. There can only be one of those. And in our family relationship example, a mother can have many children. So if I change the output for that simple query that we just used and add gift amount as an output, and remember that the duplicates are still suppressed through that toolbar option, but I have duplicates back again. And the reason for that is I added in that problematic one-to-many field of gift amount. So one way to combat duplicates is to suppress them. That only works for one-to-one fields. So another way to combat duplicates is to only use one-to-one fields in your output. That limits you considerably for what you can use in output. For example, not being able to see gift amount could be a problem for a fundraising or development office. So you need to go to another tool. And this doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't use a one-to-many field in your criteria. It just means that you can't rely on the results window for displaying the results accurately. Again, you can't rely on the results window of query for the what. The query gives you the who. So to move on to the what, you might use one of the different function areas of Razor's Edge. And we'll go through these one at a time. Query list, report, mail, export, and merge. And each one of these other function areas does dedupe the query. So the minute you bring the query into another function, it recognizes that it's not looking at the details. It's looking at the one person, at the one organization, and is giving you output based on that one record. So I think the next simplest solution to duplicates than suppress duplicates is the query list. So I'll start just the same by creating a query of gifts greater than, or donors with gifts of $500 or more. So the same criteria, the same exact query of 146 records, looks like 495. So I'm going to save that, and then instead of creating a new query, I've already created the query, so I'll just click on New Query List instead. And then that brings up a search screen so that I can select the query that I just saved. So I'm in Query List, and it's allowing me to search the entire library of existing queries. So here's the one I just created, and I will pull that one into Query List. Automatically, without my doing anything, it dedupes the query. So see down at the bottom in the right-hand corner, I'm back to 146. And I can confirm that by scrolling down that left-hand column where IDs are listed, and I'm not seeing any duplicates. But also Query List automatically brings in the addressee salutation and the primary or the preferred address of the constituents in the query. And then when you hover or you're in the row of a particular constituent, then you see these details on them. So my cursor is in Carl Rhodes' row, and I'm seeing his most recent, his largest, and his first gift, as well as the constituent codes for him. So you get some bonus information out of the query list, and it also dedupes your query. A lot of organizations use this when they're creating a mailing list to kind of vet the mailing list and go through and make sure that the individuals they want to see on it are on it. You can also export from here if your practice is to create a query and bring the addresses into the query results screen and you still have those duplicates. Then you export to Excel and manually remove the duplicates. To create a mailing list, you could use the query list instead. Much easier, much less sort of heavy lifting. All right, so, and this is just confirming that I have a deduped list. So when a query list is saved, it's static, and you can see here that only one key was created for every record instead of every row or every time the one-to-many criteria was satisfied. Also, it's my practice or habit to name query lists with the word list in the title just to help differentiate between the two. But Razor's Edge for you will check the box to the far right to indicate which in the library are lists and which are regular old queries. So reports are another tool, another function area or module in Razor's Edge that will take your query, dedupe it from multiple rows, and give you better options for outputting details, or the what. So again, you would start just the same by creating the query, saving and closing, and then go to reports, and this example uses the gift detail and summary out of financial reports, and you can attach that query by clicking on include selected records. So that's all I did. I chose gift detail and summary. I attached my query of donors with $500 gifts or more. And on the bottom page, you can see down there at the bottom near the left, at the last page, it details how many donors are on the list, and I'm at that 146 number. And it it does dedupe the individuals and the organizations so that there's only one block per person or business, but then you see the individual gifts listed out with a total. So not only do you get a deduped query or group, but you also get additional information, again, without really having to work so terribly hard to get it and to do the heavy lifting or the manual labor, because the gift detail and summary report is organized to show you gift detail on a group of individuals or organizations. And then again, mail is another Razor's Edge function that will take your query, remove any duplicate rows, and then do some extra work for you. In this case, I chose a label function, and it took the individuals on the query. And again, just to reiterate, the query output doesn't have to have the details that are used in these other functions. For example, in the query output of the query that I saved initially, I didn't have gift date, I didn't have pledge balance, I didn't have gift totals. So you don't have to spend a lot of time putting output into the query. Just use the criteria tab to get the query right, and then let these other functions choose the output for you. So same token, I did not have to choose in the initial query the addresses in order for the address to come into the query list that we looked at previously, or here for the labels. So I chose the mail function of label and attached the query again in the include selected option, and I got some nice labels that I can run straight through my printer and put on envelopes and get the mail out to the post office. So much quicker than manipulating in Excel to remove those duplicates. And I just output the constituent number in order to show you that this was truly an unduplicated list. And again, in the toolbar of the labels preview window, you see that there were 140. So I did lose a few from my 146, and that is because some of the individuals are married, and had an individual record for each spouse instead of one household record. So when I limited this mailing to only send one label, one envelope, one letter to each household, some of those spouses got combined into one letter. Okay, so export is different, of course, than exporting from the query window, from the results window of the query. Export function is a completely separate thing down the left-hand side, the function toolbar, the module toolbar of the Razor's Edge window. And export will allow you to, again, deduplicate your query, but also see any number of sort of customized columns that you want. So if you're not doing a mailing, or you want more information than was in the query list or in any report that you know of, then you can create an export. Start just the same by creating and saving the query, and then opening a new export, choosing Excel as the application you're exporting to, and then attaching the query. So for this example, you can see the query attached there next to the include option, and I have selected some export fields or columns in the spreadsheet on the right-hand side. So the ID number and name, the preferred address, and then for this example, I think we want a little more information. We want a phone number, and we want a column one for gifts from this year, and then a second column with total gifts from all years. And I also threw in the constituent code there so we could see a little bit more about these folks. So export is great for when you want a lot of information that might not all be similar or found in the same place in Razor's Edge or in the same report in Razor's Edge, when you really just want to customize what you're seeing. So at the top of the screen you see sample results, the first 15 results from the export. Again, they are not duplicated, one row per person, and we have all of the additional details that I wanted to see in this example. If I want to look at the entire list, I click Export Now in the bottom right-hand corner of the export window, and then once it's done its export process, you'll see the results, and again, we're back to 146 rows from the export, not 495. So export is a fantastic tool because it's so customizable, it's so flexible. You can really create a column in the spreadsheet for any field in the database, but there is a little more heavy lifting involved than with mail, reports, or query list. And then the last option that you have for removing queries is to merge two queries together. The merge process creates a static query, like in query list, where there's one key in the query for every record instead of one row or one data set for every time the record meets the query criteria. And sometimes you have two queries that exist, or you have the second query that exists already. In my example, I created a query to sub out anyone who had requested not to receive mail. So if in my imaginary scenario I'm using this donor list of donors with gifts greater than $500 or more to send them some piece of mail, then I don't want to send it to anyone who's requested no mail. So my first query will be the $500 one, and my second query will have this criteria of solicit code equals do not mail. And then instead, on the query screen of clicking New Query or Query List, I'll go to Merge Queries, which gives me a dialog box to select which queries to merge together. So this dialog box comes up as soon as you select to merge queries together, and you can see that I've selected the donors greater than $500 query as primary and the do not mail query as secondary. Then the operator that I'm going to choose, the action that I want the merge process to take, is to subtract anyone in the do not mail query from the donors with gifts of $500 or more query. Again, a static query is the result of any two merges, and the results in this particular case are 145. So of my 146, only one person, only one constituent had selected to do not receive mail. But again, all of these options got me down to a number of records between 140 and 146, depending on the other options that were set, the other parameters for those functions, which is a lot better than 495. So those are just some simple tools for getting rid of duplicates or dealing with duplicates or finding a way to be less frustrated by creating queries when there are duplicate rows in the query results. You could use one-to-one fields, you could suppress the duplicates, or you could use another function to carry your query over to and let that function dedupe the query for you. If you're using another function, I think it's helpful and just less time consuming to choose any output for the query. It's just not necessary, and you'll have to do it again in the report or in the mail or in the export. So,
great, thanks. Yeah, sorry, Allison, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just going to let you know we do have a couple of questions that have popped up. Looks like we've got a question from another Allison. Are phone numbers considered one-to-many?
That's a great question, and it depends on how you pull them into the query or which field you use. Phone number itself is a one-to-many field. So if you chose phone number is not blank, or phone number contains, 336, which is an area code, for maybe your area, then yes, that would be a one-to-many field, and that would create duplicates. If you chose phone type, then or phone number by phone type, then that's a one-to-one field for each address or for each data set. And this also depends on which version of Razor's Edge you're on. If you're on anything beyond 7.94, then you can have duplicate phone types again. Anything prior to 7.94, phone types have to be unique. So you would have to have email, email 1, email 2 in order to put multiple email addresses on one constituent record. So I guess the short version of that answer is if you're looking for phone numbers, select by the phone type.
All right, great. And see, now that she had a follow-up question that is this done or used only when we have duplicates in our query?
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly what you mean by is this done, but or what this is, but I prefer, and by force of habit, and when I work with training new users, I suggest, yes, always either using another tool like reports or mail or export instead of spending a lot of time putting output into the results windows. Because even if you're not getting duplicates in the results window, sometimes it's just a lot more, it's a lot easier, or you have a lot more flexibility, or you have a lot more power in those other tools to output information than you do in the query window. So if I were training new users, I would focus a lot less on drawing or putting output into the query results window and put more focus on going into those other function areas, which is not to say that working in query is wrong. I just think it leads to less confusion and less frustration for a new user, but if that's your habit to work in query, then no, you wouldn't have to use those other functions when you don't have duplicates.
Okay, great. I have another question here from Melinda. What is the difference between the merge example that you gave and adding the solicit criteria in the first query?
None, essentially. But the merge process does sometimes give you better results, but you could absolutely add multiple criteria into that first query, one of which would be solicit code does not equal do not mail. But in addition to that being kind of confusing to think about because it's a double negative, do not include, do not mail, sometimes when you bring negative operators into a query, it can interrelate with other criteria in a way you didn't expect. In that example, it's simple enough that it could have worked just as well either way. But if you have 3 or 4 criteria rows in your query and you throw in a do not or does not equal or does not contain operator in there, then it can bring back in people that you've already excluded or excludes people that you want to be in there, if that makes sense. But essentially, yes, you could do it either way.
Okay. Let's see. You've got another question. This is from Martha. Can a new query list be put in alpha order without having to export?
Yeah, that's unfortunately not, there's not a sort option in query list. If your query itself that you first bring into query list is sorted alphabetically, then the query list will be in order. And you can click on the column headers within query list to sort by address lines or constituent ID or any of those columns. But once you do that, there's no way to put it back in alpha order because there's not a last name column or a sort name column. There's only primary addressee, and that's going to put everything in order by M for Mr. or Ms. So that is a shortcoming of the query list, but it's meant to be a quick and dirty kind of tool more than a finesse kind of tool, or at least that's my perception of it. That might be a suggestion that you make to Blackbaud, that a sort option is included.
Okay. Let's see. You've got another question from Melinda. Does query sort order also apply to the exports?
You can sort an export, and you can, but an export and a report will use the query sort unless you select it in export or report.
Okay. Yeah, and everybody, just you feel free to use that chat window, as we said, to pop up some other questions. We'll kind of keep this open for another couple of minutes to see if anybody else has anything they'd like Allison to answer for us. Oh, here's one that's just popped up. Say from the other Allison, I know this is a basic question, but what is the difference between a query and a report?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people use those two words interchangeably, especially maybe someone in your organization, when they come to you with a request, they'll ask for them interchangeably. But in Razor's Edge speak, in the jargon, the query is that grouping tool. And a report is a standard report, a canned report, one of those, I don't know how many, 90 or so, that comes standard with every install of Razor's Edge. They are hardwired with some of the options that you create in the query, that you can customize in the query. So the reports don't let you have ultimate flexibility because some of the work's already done. Some of the work's done behind the scenes, so you can't change it. There are options within every report, so there's some parameters that you can change, and like we saw, you can always attach a query to a report to sort of layer on another filter to it, but you can't, and sometimes you can add an optional column or extra, you can choose to display information in one way or another, but there's always going to be something about that report that you can't change, because it's trying to take some of the work away from you, so that it's getting you to step 8 instead of starting at step 1. So queries are sort of ultimately flexible. You can query on just about any field in the database, but you're going to have a hard time getting output from a query that you can lay out on a page in a simple way, or you could distribute to other people in your office or to your board. It's not going to be a reporting tool in that way, whereas the standard reports, the canned reports, are much better at that, but they leave a little bit of the flexibility out.
Okay, great. Dee Dee, yes, I will be sending out a copy of the slide deck that Allison has shown on the screen today, along with a link to the recorded webinar. That should be ready sometime tomorrow to go out to everybody. So we'll kind of keep things open for another couple of minutes up until about 2:40. And if there are no other questions at that point, we'll wrap things up. So feel free to chat those questions over, and we'll answer them as they come in.
I'll make another comment. I used as examples for all my queries today a constituent type of query, but the same holds true for other types of queries as well: gifts, participants, relationship. You can always use one of the other tools like export to help dedupe any type of query.
All right, now we have another question from Allison that's popped up. So if I were needing to do a mailing to my constituents who are retirees, I would do a query and then use the mail tool in queries to get my labels. And then I guess she's asking, what about the letters?
Right, and there's a tool in Mail as well for actually merging the letters together. It allows you to link over to Microsoft Word from within Razor's Edge and write the body of the letter, and then when you get to clicking on, or when you're ready, you click on a merge button like we saw in that export screen where we were ready to send it to Excel. So you just send it directly to Word, and that letters process out of Mail takes the people in your query and uses the Razor's Edge information to slot their data into the merge fields in your letter that you've written. So yes, there's a way to let Razor's Edge interface with Microsoft Word and to actually produce the letters to go along with the labels and get your mailing out.
Great. I guess we'll keep things open for about another minute. And so feel free to chat over any other questions, but we'll get things wrapped up right at 2:40. Oh, there's a question from Allison. Allison, I can shoot you the links to all of the E-Series webinars we've done so far, and then make sure you're on the list too for ones that are coming up through the rest of the year as well. So I can shoot you over links to everything we've done in the past. Well, I think that's the last question we've got for the day. So I want to thank you again, Allison, for all the great content and input, and for everybody for participating. Look for an email from me, hopefully, I'd say tomorrow or by the end of the day on Friday, with a link to the recorded webinar along with the PowerPoint slide deck. And thanks again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.